I'm Nate Lenz, CEO of Concurrent. I'm joined by David McBee, CEO and founder of Wealth Partners Alliance. I've had the pleasure of knowing David for a number of years now and helped facilitate their original breakaway from Wells Fargo, having operated on the Profit Formula channel, having worked alongside of them in the merger of their team with another group to form Wealth Partners Alliance. And now I've seen them surpass $2 billion in total assets from a growth trajectory standpoint. David was in the office today. We were doing some business planning for 2026, and we really had some interesting conversations around where the industry is headed, how the landscape has evolved. And we thought it would make sense to just to jump in and talk through some of those so that we can, really kind of hash some of these things out for your benefit. So David, man, it's great to have you in the office. Excited to have you here.
Great. I appreciate it. I really appreciate you having me in today. It's been super valuable. And if I don't want to let the day go beyond without saying how wonderful that logoed jacket looks on you.
I've got my snowflake
on. That Wealth Partners Alliance snowflake. I like it. So appreciate you kind of supporting the brand there.
Absolutely, man. Absolutely.
This has been great. And I'm glad we're getting the opportunity to do this because, I've been doing some, exploring with my team, done a couple of videos, and I've been wanting to talk to you about kind of your thoughts and what you're seeing. You have a different perspective than we have just down in Texas, but I've been talking about the independent area and the space and the definition of independence. And I did a video even. It's become very gray. What does it really even mean to be independent anymore? Because you look at it through the lens of a wirehouse advisors. You think of it one way. Through the lens of somebody who's already somewhat independent, they see it different. Do you see it's a gray area now in the independent space?
Well, it's interesting. I mean, there's no shortage of affiliation options out there. I think you've seen that evolve rapidly. There's been a lot of innovation in the space. I think really you've seen a lot of innovation over the last 20 years or so. I'd say before that, you had the mergers of a number of major firms that formed the wirehouses. But really coming out of the financial crisis and maybe slightly before that, you saw a new wave of innovation in the independent space. You saw firms like Focus, Hightower, Dynasty, all innovating within the independent marketplace. You also had what we now refer to as the more traditional roll-ups, the wealth enhancement groups, the creative plannings, have a tremendous amount of growth over the last 15 years or so. And in a lot of ways, I think that's created more optionality for advisors. I think it's created better outcomes for clients in terms of the different resources and capabilities that they're bringing to the table on behalf of their clients. So I think it's all been a huge net positive. But that being said, when we get to today, I think it's led to your point, it's complicated. There's a lot of different avenues to go down out there. And so I think it's really important for advisors to try to learn as much as they can so they can make an informed decision. And even staying where they are is making a decision.
Right.
And so understanding the landscape, I think, is mission critical to anyone's process. But I would agree with you. It's definitely gray, and hopefully we can shed some light on that topic.
Yeah, I'm a big proponent when I'm talking to advisors, whether we're talking to them about joining Wealth Partners Alliance or Concurrent or just giving them advice. I think it's a model for everybody.
Yeah.
Right. There's all these models exist because advisors have a number of needs for their practice and a number of needs for their clients. But when you look at the main options, aren't some of these looking just like the wirehouse? I mean, aren't they feeling like they're going independent? And not to be negative, but what's the difference if you're at a large firm and W-2 employee at a lower payout?
Yeah, no, it's you are absolutely starting to see this homogenization towards an employee model. But just to take a step back, and I guess I'm asking this question because I already know the answer to it because we've talked about this before, but does the name Joseph Schumpeter ring a bell to you? Pretend like you don't know.
Okay.
Pretend like we didn't talk
a story about this.
Yeah.
Okay.
So Joseph Schumpeter was an economist that did a bunch of work around this idea of creative destruction.
Mm-hmm.
They now coined it Schumpeterian growth theory, but the concept is that innovation really leads to jumps in productivity.
Right.
And so I think you saw that, right, in the independent space. You saw firms like Focus, Hightower, Dynasty innovating in the way that they're supporting firms in their business models, all different flavors of it. And so what you saw is you did see this catalyst towards this movement of independence. You also parallel tracks at the same time saw the traditional roll-ups. I remember I was in the Raymond James home office. This is circa 2011. Wealth Enhancement Group was coming in for a home office visit. It was a big to-do. They were a massive firm. They were evaluating the custody platform. They had $7 billion of assets. I think they're upwards of $120 billion now, right? Over that time frame. So So you've seen this explosion of growth down two tracks: more innovative independent models as well as more traditional models. During that time frame, you've also seen a huge influx of private equity capital supporting these efforts. And it's no surprise, why is private equity now finding the space, and it's starting to get more mature in terms of their investments into the space. But when you look at our business, it's a unique combination of growth and yield.
Right.
That's the investment thesis. And if you look at the macro trends of, the number of that people talk about the generational wealth transfer, I think there's a horizontal wealth transfer that's going to happen first, money going to spouses before it ultimately gets to the next generation. But that being said, you're going to see a lot of money in movement. There's a rising demand for advice. There's a flat to declining supply of advice in terms of headcount of advisors. I think technology will do a lot to solve for that. So it's not a huge, massive crisis the way it may be portrayed in some instances. But that being said, there's a great macro tailwinds for what we do. So it's great. So you think about the combination of yield and growth, the macro tailwinds behind it. It's clear to see why investment is coming in. But what you saw is you had this huge jump. You had this huge movement of advisors into the independent space. You saw this maturing of private equity investment in the space. But now all of a sudden, what's happening is you've had some firms have some false starts, firms that were looking to recap that didn't quite get the multiples that they were looking for. Well, all of a sudden, you see the firms that had tremendous success in accessing capital, and they tend to look the same. These tend to be the firms like the creative plannings that are, I always talk about when we're talking about degrees of integration, it's like on a scale of 0 to creative,
Yeah.
But that being said, it's interesting to see where all of a sudden you've had these fully integrated models have a high degree of success in raising capital. So what's happening? The early innovators in the space are now starting to homogenize towards those firms.
Right.
I don't think that's in the best interest of the industry. And frankly, I think it's opening the door for firms like ours and other independent firms that are empowering entrepreneurs. I think it's really an opportunity for us to gain some share. So, from that perspective, it's interesting to see this homogenization. And I say that to say, you asked the question of, is it starting to look more like wirehouses? Well, yeah, like all of a sudden we're going to end up with another wave of wirehouses. You're going to have $1 trillion RIA here in pretty short order. You're going to see mergers of RIAs. You look at, was it Merrill Lynch? Well, the full name of Merrill Lynch, right? Or you start to think like Merrill Lynch, Pierce Fenner, right? Like it goes all the way out. How did those firms get to that size? You went, the A.G. Edwards to Wachovia to Wells.
Right.
You saw it through these mergers. So I think you're seeing history repeat itself in some ways, again, for the benefit of the clients. But in a lot of ways, I think this homogenization is uninspired and is opening a door for firms like ours to really gain share in the near future.
Yeah. So when advisors are seeing this, and maybe there's possibly even negative, association to, well, I just look what's happening there, that wasn't working, or private equity's involved or whatever. What tools, what metrics do advisors start to use? I say in my first video, it's like, you just can learn the vocabulary. I mean, there's a lot of concepts that you just need to start to understand before you can even start to make that. So, and I also say in the video about the things that you can do, and at the end kind of put a table together, pros and cons of each of these subjects. What are the main metrics? Like what are advisors need to be thinking about when they're?
Yeah, I think they need to first look internally, right? They need to be very deliberate and intentional around what they want to be when they grow up, so to speak. There's a lot of advisors that are running great books of business that are growing primarily through referrals. But at the end of the day, they're not trying to build an empire. They're not trying to manage a huge staff of people. They like the simplicity, the balance that they have in the profession. And that's perfectly fine. There's nothing wrong with that. You've got other advisors who are hustling, trying to grow their business, are looking at building COI relationships, are experimenting with different marketing techniques, and are at the point where they're starting to have some capacity constraints. So they need to start thinking about building a team. All of a sudden that becomes front and center versus serving clients. And so, thinking about, okay, if I am at that phase of growth and I do need to start to build a team, what do I need to be successful there? And are there opportunities for me to leverage centralized resources already at scale to be able to fill those needs, or do I need to home grow it? Then you've got firms that are at scale, that are building enterprises, that are leveraging their infrastructure for growth and recruiting, that have kind of, marketing strategies, that are doing advertising, that are building brand recognition. That's an entirely different animal. So I think depending on what phase of the business life cycle you're in will help you start to narrow down, okay, well, what part of the affiliation spectrum makes the most sense? also where you're at in your career timeline. If you're nearing succession, obviously that's going to put different options on the table than others might. And I think it's important to really understand and be deliberate about the fact of, whether or not you have the appetite to take on the business risk of independence. It's not a negative if you don't, right? There's a lot of great employee model firms where you can operate, you can serve clients, you can provide a tremendous client experience, you have advanced planning and tools and capabilities, and you can walk in every day, turn on your computer, do your job, and not have to worry about paying the utility bills and keeping the lights on.
Mm-hmm.
And so I think just really understanding, first looking inside and saying, okay, what am I trying to build here? At what stage of my business life cycle am I in? And thinking about what your needs are to get to that next step will help you start to narrow the field of what business models and what support infrastructure is needed to ultimately fulfill that journey.
Yeah, I'm trying to think of a good analogy, but it's be careful what you ask for, right? If
Sure.
you're from one end of the spectrum and you're like, I want to get out of this employee model and I want to be independent, I want to own everything. And you get there, you're like, oh my goodness, I don't even have time to run my business or grow my business because I'm running a business. So, obviously to plug what our model is, what are the key benefits of having a model that's, I use a football field analogy.
Yeah.
Maybe we don't have to go all the way to the other end of the end zone, but if we can get to the other 20-yard line where we're almost there and we have all the benefits, but we don't have all the negatives.
Yeah.
What are the key benefits of the model?
Yeah, get to the red zone. We want to live on the plus side of the field. I loved in your previous video, you looked at a football field and said, if you're coming off the goal line, right, you're coming out, you're on the, on the 1 yard line coming out. All of a sudden, that's the equivalent of being in a bank model, right? The most captive type structure. And as you continue to move down the field and you get into a hybrid model, which might be an independent broker dealer where you're part of a corporate RIA, but under a broker dealer infrastructure, you're starting to cross the 50 because those are models that do allow you some degree of independence and autonomy.
Right.
And then you get into the RIA space and now, you're getting towards closer to the red zone. We like to think we're on that side of the field, but I would say, buyer beware. There are certain firms in the RIA space that are more captive than the most captive bank channels.
Yeah,
right?
We've seen it in Concurrent.
So
that's right.
That's like, my wife went to Florida State. We've been a Florida State football fan. So it reminds me of the Jameis Winston, fumble in the Rose Bowl where he's running backwards and throws the ball up in the air against Oregon, and all of a sudden you thought you were on the, 50-yard line going in and now you find yourself back at the minus 20. So
they were crushing the football analogies.
Right?
Yeah.
Hey, you got me down this track, which is definitely my comfort zone.
All right.
But from our perspective, when you look at our business model and what we've created, we're operating in the RIA space. So we've reached the last stop in the train, right? We have custodial relationships with Fidelity, Schwab, Goldman Sachs. Ultimately our role is to be a platform for and strategic investor in independent wealth management firms. Just as we're an investor in WPA, right? In the individual affiliated advisors that you work with. And so really, I think the benefit of our model is we know our role, we stay in our lane, we believe in advisor centricity and brand autonomy. That's why you're operating under your own brand, you're building your own unique local culture. As you're affiliating advisors, you guys are working on marketing campaigns, you're providing local support staff and office space, and continue to build out markets there. That really fits hand in glove with the platform that we operate.
Right.
So our focus is handling the compliance and supervision, the technology, the custodial operations, billing, right? All those different functions that are table stakes that have to be done really well, but can easily be centralized and scaled because they're backstage.
Right.
And then providing open architecture around how you manage assets, providing support around planning, and insurance and advanced planning. All of those different functions are things that we are bringing to the table as a partner to you. But at the end of the day, we want you out on the front stage in front of the audience, which is your clients, hitting the high note. And if we can be handling those backstage functions, that's us doing our job. That's our model. And, it might not be for everyone. There are certain folks that don't necessarily want to be on the front stage hitting the high note, right? And don't want that to be on their shoulders, but that's okay too. And so I think where we've kind of found ourselves within the landscape is, yes, we're not, I'll call it fully independent in that you have your own ADV, you're operating your own RIA, you make all the decisions. I'd say take it one step back from there, but what you gain from it is our pricing power, our service power, our scale, our infrastructure, and helping you do your business. but in a format where you own your clients, you own the business itself, you can build enterprise value in that business. And I think we've got some unique solutions on the capital side as well to help you either de-risk, facilitate succession, fund growth that are really allowing our firms to excel in this supported independent structure.
Okay, I got one more question, then I'm going to bring it home after that. So, we met each other probably in 2018, kind of launched with you guys in 2019. We've been through a lot, right? We've had some shifts in the business. You've said it, some starts and stops. We've learned a ton. Hit a couple of high notes, a couple of key areas. How's the landscape changed? How's the kind of the business changed? How's the focus of Concurrent changed over that period?
Yeah. And for those that don't know the history, we originally built the business as an OSJ.
Right.
In an independent broker-dealer structure.
Right. 50-yard line.
We're sitting by the 50-yard line.
Right.
Which was a great place to be.
Right.
I remember selling hard against the RIA space like 7-8 years ago, probably around that time frame.
Right.
Because I know you guys were looking at some options in the RIA space as well. And I do think, and look, the OSJ model is great. It provided us our start. You can't hate what got us here. And it really served the purpose because it allowed us to get really good at what I'll call the ancillary value add benefits. Things like business consulting, got really good at transitions, being able to come alongside of our firms and support them as business owners, and really help them not only turnkey the move to independence, but thrive once they got there. All of a sudden, 2022, we have to make the move to the RIA space. We had to reinvent ourselves. We had to restructure our team. We had to make a number of new hires. We had to build a tech stack. We had to choose custodians. You were in Boston with me as we were evaluating Fidelity as our initial custodian and have since added Schwab and Goldman to the mix as well. And so it was really, having gone through that progression from the 50 down to the call to 20, using the football analogy, we've learned a lot along the way. But it's really interesting. I do think in a lot of ways, we found ourselves at the right place at the right time. When you think about the RIA space, it's more approachable than ever. Technology used to be a point of competitive disadvantage.
Right.
We talk about it all the time of, hey, well, if you go to the RIA space and you've got to go get all these different tools to be able to deliver the same client experience, and that's like 6 different logins. What are you going to do? That's a lot of tabs to have open at once. But, you've seen technology capabilities and integrations tighten, and really the roads kind of come up to meet us in that regard. What used to be a point of competitive disadvantage has now become a point of competitive advantage, especially when you see things that are being done now with data infrastructure and AI. Really, the ability to be nimble and our ability to kind of start de novo with the creation of our platform a few years ago has put us, I think, in a prime position.
Sure, I've seen it.
And I think that's going to be able to add efficiencies. We talked about later this scarcity of advisors and, the McKinsey study of 100,000 advisor shortage by 2034. I think a big part of that's going to be picked up by gains in efficiency through technology. And we're already starting to see that. And because we're operating in the fully independent space, we're able to and we're at scale, we're able to make the investment in those tools, which is putting that power and that efficiency in your hands. So in a lot of ways, maybe we're better lucky than good in having had to make the move to the RIA space, had to reinvent ourselves, but now seeing that it's really where the tide is going and technology has come up to meet us. You're seeing capital. We shouldn't forget that when you think about the RIA space and being fully independent, it also means you have an investable equity structure. When you look at private equity investment coming into the space, it's not going into the independent broker-dealer space, or at least affiliates of independent broker-dealers, right? It's not going into wirehouse teams.
Right.
It's because at the end of the day, in those models, and I'm not saying this is a bad thing, you still have a landlord.
Yeah.
They set the rules. If you're a part of a corporate RIA underneath a broker-dealer, at the end of the day, right, that firm, now you own the relationships,
right?
But in terms of the data, right, they own the clients.
Yeah.
When you look at the RIA space, that's when all of a sudden you have an investable equity structure. That's when you're able to take on capital and create really unique structures like what we've done through our partnership model. So the space has evolved. Again, the RIA space, I think, is the right solution. There's a variety of models within the RIA space. Some of them are starting to look more like wirehouses, maybe than they used to. But I think it's been a net positive both for the advisor and the end client as a result of it. And I think we're in a great position to continue to capitalize on that continued movement to further independent models.
Yeah. So I sit in a unique seat, right? Because not only am I managing Wealth Partners Alliance, but I'm also an advisor. Yeah. And I've been able to see all these things from kind of our side of the field over here, watching what Concurrent's doing to build all this, put it all together. And I've seen firsthand the increases in the benefits of the technology, how nimble we're able to be on adding technology and adding resources so quickly, which has really benefited us. And I think you would probably go across the Concurrent network and say, how fast have you grown your business since you've been here? And obviously we've seen our individual practices, our recruiting practices explode. And you're right, maybe better lucky than good, but we would not have seen it, I don't think, in the 50-yard line. You have to be in this area of the field, I think, to really accelerate your growth.
Really? Yeah, I would agree. And I think we've seen too, a shift in mentality. When we met in 2018, you came on board, we started to make minority investments in firms in 2020. I know you were part of our founding partner group that participated in that. During those first round of conversations, I remember talking to a number of teams, and when I would approach them about selling a minority equity stake in their practice, they'd look at me like I had three heads.
Right.
It's like unheard of. At that point, every deal was, 2 times recurring, 1 times non-recurring, paid out over 5 years on an earnout with some broker dealer financing on the front end.
Yeah, and I hope you like it here.
Right? It was interesting. And and accessing liquidity out of your business was inextricably tied to succession planning, right? And who the successor was. I think what's really evolved is you've seen new innovative models, again, good for advisors, good for clients. And I think we've been on the leading edge of that, where this minority stake way of aligning interests has become more in vogue. And now every prospect call we have, the advisor's asking, okay, what's your equity model? So you've seen the pendulum swing.
Yep.
I think a lot of advisors have talked to traditional roll-ups where it's, hey, sell us 100% of your practice, become an employee of our organization, take meaningful chips off the table, roll some equity into our structure. And for some advisors, that's a great solution. It could be a great succession solution. I tend to think those tend to be more white flag businesses where they've either reached a plateau or it's for succession purposes. But we've seen a number of firms that have evaluated those options, have decided they don't want to put on the fatigues and salute the flag.
Yep.
And so, but now they're settling back and they realize the benefit of aligning with a partner that has greater scale and resources. And that's how we landed on our partnership model, which is, and I know you've participated in it, but we take a minority equity stake in your business. You get cash and equity in our business. It creates alignment. And that can be dialed in based on how much liquidity you're looking to access. And really what it does is it creates a mechanism for future liquidity. But from there, all of our firms also have tag along optionality into any future event that we have. So if we recapitalize, and we have done this, in many cases, we've now done multiple rounds of investments into our firms, allowing them to tap liquidity for different reasons. But I think what's really unique is that now we have this structure where our firms are fully independent, but they have the ability to access liquidity at outsized multiples, not otherwise achievable standalone. And I think that's exactly what we're trying to do. How do we help you punch above your weight without giving up control?
Right.
And it's that unique combination that I think has allowed us to get the adoption that we've seen within our organization, right? That minority investment is entirely optional. We tell teams to evaluate it on its own merit and to make sure that it's a good fit for them and their business. But of the 81 firms that are operating on our platform and the 5 third-party RIAs that we've now made investments in, of the 81 on the platform, 79 have participated in that structure. And so, and again, they fit every shape and size. You've got everyone from, 38-year-old advisors that are in heavy growth mode up to 72-year-old advisors that are nearing succession. And I think the flexibility of that capital structure really allows us to craft a solution that fits each archetype of advisor.
Right,
that we
meeting them where they are, where
exactly.
they practice, a life cycle. But what's the analogy you make about turning entrepreneurs into employees and just
exactly?
It's tough to do that, right?
It's dangerous.
As a model.
We were talking about that earlier, right? In terms of recruiting incentives and thinking about how we incentivize future growth. No one's more incentivized than if they own the business. Yeah. And that's what we don't want to do, is turn entrepreneurs into employees. We want to make sure that we can harness that entrepreneurial spirit because it's powerful. And that's where we think we will see the fastest growth.
Yeah, we're seeing it. All right, last question. And nobody's better than just off the cuff than you are. So this was, you aren't prepared for this or whatever, but what's this industry look like, 5-10 years out? I mean, we've seen so much just since we first met. What do we look like in 5 to 10? We're probably in early innings here in this space. What do we look like 5 to 10 out?
This might be an unpopular opinion.
Okay.
I don't think it looks that different. Right?
Okay.
I think in terms of clients are looking for more holistic services and resources, but I don't think that's different than now. I think we're seeing that already. Clients are coming to their advisor to be that center point in the relationship to be able to align tax planning and estate planning, financial planning, investments, all of those things, and really be able to wrap around them and serve them in a holistic fashion. I think firms are going to get better at doing that. I think it might become cheaper to do that. But I also think from an operations standpoint, what makes this profession really unique is that the core value add to it is not picking investments. It's not, running the tax calculations. Like we're seeing it, like AI could do all that stuff,
right?
But it's being able to sit across from a grieving widow and help her navigate that next chapter, or, a young family that's planning and they're thinking about college savings and buying their first house and helping them navigate that. It's the trust. It's helping folks avoid their innate biases, right?
Mm-hmm.
All of those things. It's the qualitative elements of it that cannot be replaced by technology. I think technology will just make us more efficient in being able to do it. I also think, this idea of assets, generational wealth transfer, all the assets are going to end up in the hands of Gen Z in short order. It's not. You look at statistically, people are living longer, specifically women. Now, I do think you're going to see more and more assets in the hands of women investors.
I do too.
And so if you're ignoring that, you're doing yourself a disservice in them. But I think I think you're going to see assets shift more into the hands of women investors as part of that horizontal wealth transfer. I think you're going to see the demand for advice continue. I think the demand for holistic advice is going to continue. You're going to continue to see movement to the independent space. I just think we're going to be able to make some meaningful gains in efficiency as a result of new tools and resources that come to the table. But the core of the business, I think, is going to look very much the same as it does today. I'm not a huge subscriber to the idea that there's going to be massive fee compression over the coming years.
For years,
Yeah. The robo-advisor is not taking over. AI is not taking over. Amazon's not going to take our jobs.
Lots of disruptions in my career over 30 years.
Yeah.
And it's looked a lot the same when it comes to actually the advice, deliverable of advice to client.
And that's the value add.
Yeah. All right. Well, thanks. This was great. I'm glad we had the opportunity to do this. Thank
Absolutely,
you.
Man.
Yeah.
Likewise.